Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's me, Big Z. So it's the first week of June 2020, and the biggest news to hit the world right now, after the COVID, is George Floyd and his murder by 3 cops over in the USA. It has sent shockwaves across the globe, protests and riots, of course, across the country of USA, and even to the point where countries across the world are marching in solidarity for the issue that they are facing, which is the general racism that they have to put up with. Now, obviously, it's not just for George Floyd by himself, but George Floyd's instance was obviously a symptom of something greater, an ongoing issue that's been going on for a long time, for quite a few hundred years, arguably, to that effect. Now, I'm not a black man, obviously, right? I'm not an American. But as an outside observer, I've noticed something that's happening across social media feeds. Now, social media is an integral part of our life, whether we like it or not. It is how we get our news. It is how we get our news when news media has either failed to cover something or is unable to cover something. That is one of the most powerful aspects of social media. What's also interesting is that Will Smith was pointing out how racism isn't getting worse, it's just getting filmed, which means to say that that's the beauty of social media. Now we're beginning to see more and more of the instances that they were facing in the first case. But the thing I've noticed on my social media, which is beginning to bug me, now with European news, there was a big problem, obviously a political agenda in regards to refugees. But the problem was people were using the term refugee and illegal immigrants interchangeably. So whilst they are both very different, a refugee and an illegal immigrant, because they were using the term interchangeably, a refugee suddenly in public's eyes meant the same as an illegal immigrant. As a matter of fact, they just called them all illegal immigrants, and that obviously was an issue that had to be undone. We had to, in the mindset of the people, separate the refugee from the illegal immigrant, because whether we like it or not, we are cognitively lazy. Whatever we are fed, we tend to accept, and without questioning it too much. Now, I see the same problem again with protesters and rioters / looters. There is a vast difference between a protester and the rioter / looter. Now, I've seen this. Now, the first images that came out of the USA were of destruction, were of carnage. People smashing up cities, burning down buildings, looting businesses, destroying cop cars, destroying public cars, etc., etc., etc. Those were the first images we saw. So naturally, across the globe, we started saying, well, that's not how you protest, right? Because obviously they're not going to listen to you. You're damaging your own property. Why would they give a damn? Then people had to try and justify the images that they saw. The justification being that there are very frustrated people, they are very angry people, and that's why they're doing that. But the problem is, that didn't need justification. What needed to be done, which is finally becoming about now, I think, if people bother to look, is people are differentiating now that those were the protesters, not the protesters, these were the rioters and the looters. And those were the people who managed to get their images onto the news media outlets much more sooner than the protesters. Why? Because bad news sells. On the other side, you go onto your social media feeds, and now perhaps it might be picked up by news media, is how the protesters are trying to stop the looting, trying to stop the burning down of buildings, trying to stop the carnage. As a matter of fact, police officers are actually joining in with the protests. They are taking knees. They are marching with the protesters. They are agreeing and openly denouncing that what's happened with George Floyd and in general, the issues that they are facing. So, first things first, you must make sure you have a mental differentiation between a protester and a rioter / looter. Don't intermingle the two, otherwise you'll have no support for a valid cause, and that can be dangerous. Moving on, I am going to give a personal account. And the reason being is because whilst I say that there is a difference between a protester and a rioter / looter, there is the gray area in between. There is the man who wants to protest, who wants to march, but is so frustrated because of their generations of turning the cheek so many times and trying to follow due process so many times that it hasn't worked. And they just see no reason to do that. So of course they're going to kick off every now and then. I mean, it's not justifiable, but in my own personal case, I tell, at risk to myself, there in Pakistan I used to live, and people obviously know about Pakistan, and their police, they have a reputation, very corrupt. Unfortunately, in the many years I've lived in Pakistan, I haven't come across an honest policeman. Not really. Now, the problem that we had was my family has a restaurant, and it's a family business, right? So we serve food, there's a dining area, and there's a takeaway. So delivery and everything. So the police would come regularly. They'd come regularly to eat, but sometimes they wouldn't pay. Sometimes they'd complain the food was bad after eating all of it. Sometimes they would, maybe if they paid their bill, they'd pay 20-30% of the bill. They'd say that if you ever have a problem, we'd come to help you. And when we did have a problem, they didn't come. And they used to pick up our boys, they used to throw them in jail, handcuff them, they used to beat them up, and we'd have to go and bribe the cops to let them go. They'd regularly try and find cases against us, charge us with the magistrate for stupid things that are not even under their jurisdiction. As a matter of fact, it got to a point where 6 to 7 armed police officers tried to come into one of our branches and tried to pick up our cook because the vegetable curry that we had made, according to them, was off. And they wanted to take the boy to apologize to the chief of police. Not the chief of police, whatever, the bigwig of their local station. And I had to shout them down so badly that the neighbors today still remember the day that Zubair shouted down armed police officers so they wouldn't take one of my boys. They had gone so far as to threaten my father as well. My father has become numb to it, but because it's happened to him so much, me as an outside observer, it infuriated me. And I got to the one point where I was outside a police station. I was looking at the police station up and down. It wasn't much of a building. It was more like a mud hut with an open roof. And there were, my God, the most, when you look at these people, you can tell how corrupt they are just by looking at them. And I genuinely had a thought that crossed my mind that if I burned this building down, no one would miss them. Because it's not just my family, it's not just our business they disturbed everybody's businesses. Even to a point where a woman came to them to complain that she was being harassed, the police officer smacked her. Right? And that's just one instance in my local police station. Across the country, it's a regular. So, when I thought that you can lock the gate, burn him down, and no one would miss him, as a matter of fact, people would be rejoicing there'd be a few less corrupt cops in the world. I had to take a double take on myself that I got to such a point where I was that frustrated. Now that was only after a few years of dealing with them, and I wasn't even dealing with them full on all the time. I didn't do it, of course not, but why I'm telling you that entire story is because sometimes it is not justifiable, but it is understandable. And if it is understandable, rather than trying to fan the flames or pour petrol on it, if you come from a position of understanding with the intention to help, then you have to understand the position that they are coming from. Now you have to remember the one time a white girl from Malcolm X's era came up to him at the cafe and said that, look, I am a neutral, non-biased person. I want to help the black man's cause. What can I do? Malcolm X said nothing. You can't do anything. And at the time, he was right in his mindset because the black man needs to learn how to stand up for himself. That's what he was thinking. And the white man and the white woman, all of them, have been the cause for this chaos. And you think for a minute of the situation that individual had gone through, Malcolm X, all that time. He said afterwards he regretted it. It was the biggest regret of his life, he said. I wish I hadn't told that girl that. And I hope she found that out afterwards. Point being is, you cannot be so dismissive so quickly. You cannot be so quick to judge. It is unfair. Even though we are taught this again and again, we have become a cognitively lazy people where the first thing we hear, the first thing we read, the first thing we see, we draw up our extrapolations from that. It is unfair. So please, Make sure you understand. There's one more thing I'd like to say, which is interesting. A lot of people like to share, oh, black on black crime is worse and black on white crime is very bad. It's worse than white on black crime. It's worse than white on white crime, or whatever nonsense that they say. But the point you guys have missed is this is cop on black crime. Cop on black. And that is a very, very different circumstance. And you have to make that differentiation. You should not be that afraid of your cops. You should feel protected and feel secure with your cops. And that is probably why there are riots across the country, or at least one of the reasons. Very controversial topic. Let's see what the comments bring.